preparations for their upcoming ShenaniJAM event. Sounds like you all actually had a lot prepared, so don't need to do this much of an intro. But we have Sam Coster and Seth, as you guessed, also a Coster, and Adam Coster here in spirit. So please welcome.
He didn't die.
Defeated that.
Hey everybody, so thanks a bunch for coming. We're super excited to be here. Jamming is one of our favorite things basically in the world as far as activities to do. So we're happy to be able to come and share a little bit of the jam with all of you guys tonight. And so a big step about what we wanted to cover was sort of why you might actually jam in the first place. So what's the point? Why would you spend a whole weekend doing this? And then following up with that, how you might go about jamming to sort of maximize your experience. So first thing first, I just want to touch on why. So you're all here, which is a good first step, but why even do this thing over the weekend? Why even consider the option of doing this thing over the weekend? It's a big, crazy event, and it will take a bit out of you because for most of us, we put our lives on hold while we go into a cave and make a game for 2 years. So why do you think it is that people do game jams generally? Do you have any ideas? Or people have done one? Okay, all right. We got a few newcomers. So what have we gotten from a game jam?
Practice.
Experience.
It's a really good for me because a lot of times I can't, like, during other normal life, I can't always make the time for it, and so it's really easy to be like, this weekend I'm spending on this time,
right.
So it's a lot easier to
compressed structured thing. Yeah. Friends, those are good. Enemies also.
Getting started on a project.
Depression.
So
Wait.
getting some momentum. Yes. Basically having an artificial deadline that there's a community waiting on you to get your stuff done. Kind of. New tech. Yes. Cool. So we started off jamming in 2010 was my first one. 2011 was mine. And then together we made a game in 2012, which is called Tau 5 Gods. And this is sort of the first game that we had made. It's the second game we made as a team, I believe. Yes. And
First game as a 2-person team.
Yeah, just 2 of us. And after this game, which you'll see is not very good, we decided to go full time at this whole thing called Game Jam. Basically, there's a line involved. I could bore you for 2 more minutes, but I won't. So, the whole point is that we had, this was our first time making a game just as a 2-person team. I was on the art, and I actually wasn't an artist by any sort of trade or training. And so you can see most things are just circles with maybe some limbs poking off. And in Seth's case, a lot of this was a mixture of drag and drop and code.
Yeah, some drag and drop, some code. We've never done a top-down kind of game like this before, so it's a lot of discovery in that area. We also had a big problem. How do you get this much blood on the screen? That was a big technical
You need to know how to do
that. By the time you get to the end, it's just red. Everything is red, right? Learned a lot about sort of managing larger games because we had so many enemies on screen that by the time we were about to submit it, we had a memory overflow and the game would just crash before you could beat it. So learned all kinds of stuff. It was the first time we made a mini map, and so all these kinds of fun little tricks that we got to then sort of pull forward into future projects.
So a big part of why we do game jams nowadays is for the tech side of things, and also just to get ideas and kind of just flex a bit, because we found that even though we do this full time for our jobs, we tend to work like a sort of a steady 8 to 6, 7-ish, depending on the day, and then take breaks on the weekends and everything else. And so it's a nice way to just kind of essentially get a really huge bolt of inspiration, get some momentum going, and kind of pick up some creative energies over just a really short period of time that we can then pull into our next game project. So over the course of the last, I guess, 6 years, we've done a ton of jams, and all of them are listed on our YouTube channel. You can see a playlist of all of our previous game jams, and you can also play a bunch of them thanks to Itch. We host a bunch of them up there, so you can download them and check them out. And what you'll notice is that most of them are very medium in terms of the overall delivery at the end of the day.
They're not sort of commercial quality. You can't release them as is.
Right. And we actually did that for a while. We would make a game on Monday and then release it Monday night. So it was an 8-hour game jam. We did that for 4 weeks in a row, and then we realized that no one cares when you make a game that fast. There's just nothing super interesting that can possibly happen in that short time, and also people's attention kind of goes down. So the big questions I want to talk about is just sort of what are the best practices for getting the most out of your 48 hours, and trying to get some of that new tech, trying to maybe make some friends, and trying to have a really good time, get a lot out of the event, and that sort of thing. So the first thing I want to touch on is team size and composition.
Yes. So just like in a good MMO, you need a tank, DPS, and a healer, right? So you need people with appropriate roles for your team who are able to contribute in a meaningful way depending on what your constraints are and what your goals are. We found is there are a lot of people in game jams who maybe have never programmed before, never done art, never done music, and they're afraid. And so they say, I'm just an idea person. I'm a designer. It's my job to just kind of give everybody else work to do. It turns out that this isn't as helpful as you might think, because in a jam context, what we found is that every minute that we spend brainstorming adds about an hour of work. And so at the very beginning, at the 45-minute mark, we're done. That's it. And so if you have a designer who is every hour, just the entire 48 hours, thinking of new ideas, that person's going to go home kind of disappointed because almost none of their ideas will get to make it into the game. They will be able to do things like testing and QA and stuff like that, but it's far more effective to have somebody who's actually creating assets and creating stuff to put into the game, creating code and stuff. So if you're one of those people who you're like, I'm just going to come in and just be a designer, just pick up Maker or Unity or something and just start playing around with tutorials. There's a few days until the jam. Actually, in Sam's first jam, he was not a programmer. He picked up Game Maker 2 days beforehand, did the tutorials for drag and drop, and ended up making a fairly crude, playable top-down shooter. And so a big point of the jam is to kind of push yourself in domains where you're otherwise not really comfortable. You want to kind of think about it like how little kids are never afraid to fail at things. They fall over, they just babble and make incoherent words that don't make any sense. And when you're first starting out with making your own games, that's how you're going to be too. You have to be okay with that, because the jam is just it's a throwaway thing, right? So you're going to make it, you're going to learn all kinds of stuff, then you can move on to some good stuff afterwards.
Yeah, and a big part of the team comp thing is essentially boiling it down to the simple rule that everybody who's on your team should build something that goes into the game. And we build in a technical sense, whether that's putting some art together, going and hunting down fonts that you're going to need, hunting down music that you're going to need, or building music, all this sort of stuff. Make sure that everybody has a particular thing to do that actually gets put in the game, not just ideas. Otherwise, you tend to kind of float around quite a bit. On top of that, there is a bit of a need for essentially what is called production. So someone who says it's 6 o'clock on Saturday night, we have 1 day left. What can we get done? What needs to be cut? Who's going to get the upload ready? That sort of thing. So make sure you designate at least one person to be the person who's at least vaguely in charge of that stuff. There's not a lot of it to do. There's probably like 30 to 40 minutes of that total over the whole weekend. But a lot of teams, if they don't designate your point person who's like, okay, I'll take care of making sure we have all our stuff together for the upload, which includes some screenshots, some text, and stuff like that, you will sort of be bitten by it at the last hour, which is not the right time for anybody to have a surprise amount of work.
So our general rule of thumb is to make Sam do all that stuff because he's the artist, and we can sort of more easily meter out and figure out how much art we're going to need, and if we have an animation that's getting too complex, we can say, just cut a bunch of frames. Right? When it comes to the programming side of things, either it works or it doesn't, and if it doesn't work, we got to keep putting time into it until it does. And so programming is much harder to sort of cut time out. So if you're going to take a programmer off and put them onto typing up your description or something, or creating your YouTube video, you might have a bit of a harder time getting your game finished. So having your artist do that kind of stuff is a pretty good idea.
The next thing we're going to talk about briefly is how to do design discussions. So we've had people come and jam in our offices before, and this is one of the questions we usually ask before we get there, which is how do you guys come up with these sort of wacky ideas that you end up executing on over the weekend? Because a lot of people just already hit some weird sort of hard phase right at the beginning. And so for those, again, who are new initiates, what will happen is you'll get a theme, and then there'll be a couple of usually modifiers that you can choose to slap on there as well. Things like limited color palette or very particular weird controls and that sort of thing. So what we do is we literally essentially have like an improv session. So we take the theme idea in, and then by virtue of essentially saying yes and to whatever ideas start coming up for about 5 minutes, we come up with a game idea. So what this tends to look like is we're actually have a podcast here on Friday, which you'll actually hear this happen in the podcast. And the whole point is just to be really, really loose and not shut down ideas that your other teammates have right from the get-go. This is not the point where you're like cutting stuff already. What you're trying to do is just sort of ferret out enough ideas that maybe one of them sticks out as being something that might be a good thing for your team to seize on and go to. And usually you can kind of feel it. You kind of feel it out in a group setting. You know, a bunch of ideas come out, and as long as you're not the sort of person who's like, my idea is gold. It must be the thing we make. Which you should not be the person if you're coming to the game jam. Then the team comp tends to work itself out. A game tends to be found, and what we found is that a lot of teams will spend like 2 to 4 hours on this, which is mayhem. Like it's just way too long. As soon as you have the vaguest idea of what's going to happen, you need to start going. So what I want to show with this is a game we made for the last Scatter Jam in 2016 that we went to, which is called Betty the Yeti. So this game started off
Betty the Yeti's got an eventually extreme investment bank.
Yeah, it has some investment mechanics in it about accruing investments as you come up with math. So the original idea, I don't know what the theme was.
I don't remember what the theme was, but
Open to interpretation, I think, was the theme.
Open to interpretation?
Yes.
which is a bit vague. there were some super good modifiers, including one about global warming, and so we somehow ended up on the idea of uphill skiing. I don't know how we got there, but we did.
And then we were like, well, if you're going uphill, you need a power source. So we're like, okay, your feet are shotguns now, facing backwards.
Right.
But
We're
then
shotgun skis.
I started making the art for it, and I was like, this is hard. So I made a Yeti and a boat instead. You'll see here. So the Yeti is just boating up this mountain as quickly as possible because the water level is rising. And we just made all this shit up as we're going, right? And the whole point is, as soon as we decided, okay, we're going uphill, Steph and I sat down, we drew on a sheet of paper what the screen looked like, which was just a diagonal line across it. We're like, all right, here we go. And I sat down to make the art, and as soon as I hit a point where I said, okay, I can't seem to figure out this whole shotgun flip situation, I just said, hey, I'm going to make this a boat. And he said, all right. And then we moved on from there. And so the whole point here is that you can retcon anything. Anything in your games, anything in your stories. Oh yeah, Betty that evolves once you hit space. UFO shoots. And some of these things we do for sort of stretch goals to figure out, how far we can push ourselves and that sort of thing, which is always really fun. But the whole point being that you can start with something that seems like a good idea, and do not marry that vision. Whatever that initial vision is, you use it as a seed to get you going and sort of start figuring out what's happening. But the reality is, you are absolutely in the dark about what your game is going to be. And that's usually the case. It's still the case for us. I think there's been like 1 or 2 games we made where we knew what it was right when we got the idea, and then it turned out about what we thought it would be.
We only have it once out of probably 30 years. So the other thing about games like Betty the Yeti is like, so this is a really simple endless one. And that's okay to make some, you're not reinventing the wheel or doing something completely new for a jam. You just want to push yourself into some kind of territory that you've never been before. The fact is, we have made endless runners before, but a lot of the mechanics in this one were new. We experimented with coming up with our own collision system to see if we could get that to work, and then as well as all of our endless runners had been in straight lines, and this one was all on an angle, which weirdly complicates the math for a lot of things, right? So in ways that you wouldn't really anticipate.
And we had the discussion as soon as we drew that line. Stuff was like, "This is gonna be."
I hate this.
And I was like, "It's your job."
And so on top of that, when it comes to executing a simpler game like an endless runner, you may find that by the time you get halfway through the jam, you have the game in a state where you're actually pretty comfortable with it. You feel pretty good about it, which is why in Betty the Yeti, we said, okay, you're boating to the top of Mount Everest to escape the rising oceans of global warming. But we were done with that after the first day. And then we thought, well, what now? What if the oceans just kept rising?
Into space.
You had to boat to the International Space Station. Yep. So I updated the code a bunch to allow for sort of swapping the skin of the game, and then Sam created a whole bunch of new art assets. We added glowing particle trails coming off of Betty and stuff like that. And so we kind of got to, by doing a simpler game, we got to really try to nail the initial concept, and then do some kind of stretch goals and do some really dumb stuff kind of at the end.
This is one of the earliest games we made too. This one called Chauncey the Rabbit. How long does it take to get?
This took 2 weekends.
2 weekends. We did. This was available on the App Store, believe it or not, at some point. They had like maybe.
This was sort of this was our first actual attempt at a commercial release as well. So,
and it did get some downloads somehow.
About 12.
Yeah, I think when you win, this huge rabbit comes and his face is a slot machine, and then you get modifiers for your next run. The whole thing's insane. But the whole point being that every game we made has sort of like at some point taught us something that we then roll forward and do in the next time. So when we were working on Betty the Eddy, we got to reference like, oh, you remember that time back in Chauncey, we had this enemy that did this, or this particular weird design problem because of the runner aspect of it. What if we tried this in this particular case? So at this point, I don't know how many game jams we've done, but
30-something.
we've done 30-some jams.
We're talking about loops. Is that on your list?
It is not, but let's put it on the list.
So let's go back to Betty and the rest of Killer.
I have the power of shift control T.
So check out. So on the main menu screen, we've got a bunch of different things. So normally on a jam game, we put these kinds of things on the main menu. Why? So we don't have to make a new interface for it.
Perfect.
We don't want to spend time on that. So these are power loops, which we try to put into every single jam game we make, which is as you play the game, you accumulate points or coins or gems or whatever it is in order to purchase these modifiers to kind of upgrade your character, kind of level up and stuff like that. This kind of creates that sticky gameplay where after each run, the player's like, you know what, I'm going to work on my Yeti abs, work on my backflip powers, right? And then they can look forward to something that's new or different in the next run. So if you're able to do this kind of thing, where this is basically just sort of modifiers and numbers, right? So in our case, we tend to just kind of create one sort of singular area of the game where we track all these things in the code, and then all the different aspects of the game. Once the game is finished, we go back and we kind of weave these upgrades back into the code and modify all the different aspects of the game. So this part of the game usually takes maybe an hour or two to get these upgrades kind of laid in there, but it tends to be the thing that gets people to actually keep coming back to the game after they play it.
So some of our games that we've made in 48 hours, people have been able to play for an equivalent amount of time because of the loops. Not because it's the gameplay, not because there's like a narrative or open world adventure, but because they're just racking up some numbers and some coins for 2 days straight.
So one game we made is called Freebie, which we made in 8 hours. And my wife has played all the games that we've made. And Freeway Mutant is the only one that played for more than probably 10 hours, and she has several hundred hours in Freeway Mutant. Even though it only took us 8 hours to make. This is it. So you just run down the road, and your gun auto fires whenever you're lined up with an enemy. And as you progress, the enemies get more health, and so they take a little bit more hits, so they become sort of tougher obstacles to overcome. And you collect these different materials. Then eventually you can craft, which is just upgrading your gun to the next level. So that's the whole concept. There's, I think, 4 different enemies, and then landmines on the ground, and then holes that you can fall into. And that alone can give a player, a couple hundred hours of entertainment just because you've got upgrade systems.
Yeah, so that's something we usually we like to do a lot now, but it tends to be a stretch goal for people, especially if you're new. It's just hard enough sometimes to just get the damn thing working. And there's always some point where even now, after 7 years of doing this, where Seth will hit a bug for like 3 hours, 3 or 4 hours on Saturday. He's just like, why? And then it's like a simple.
Oh yeah, that's
This happens almost every single time. And so meanwhile, I'm like doing some art. Then I'm like, all right, do we need to cut? Are we cutting something? Do we need to not do this? Should we go work on some marketing stuff? Whatever.
Yeah, always allocate 6 hours for semicolon fine tuning.
Yeah. So I think the next thing I want to talk about was food and sleep. because most people have I think, a very weird idea about how this actually works during a game jam. You are working your ass off for 40 hours in a game jam contest. And the reality is if you don't sleep, your work turns to garbage, a steaming pile of it. And if you eat like a really weird stuff, you also tend to like not make good things. So where I think a few times in our earliest jams we tried to do the people were like, oh, stay up all night, it's crazy, you know, get the Red Bulls and Mountain Dew and Cheetos, let's go. And then you're hungover on like Sunday because of all the junk food and not sleeping, and like you try to put a sleep-deprived programmer on a bug problem, you're just going to get more bug problems. Like that's just how that works. So really, honestly, like, make sure you set aside 8 hours for sleep, or however long you tend to get some sleep, 7 or 8 hours. And like try not to cut back on that too much because actually it'll really overall impact how much of the stuff you get done. So we tend to get at least 8 hours of sleep every night, sometimes 9, depending on if we're feeling loose about everything. And then we just drink coffee. We have usually a Red Bull. That's our sort of extra juice in the afternoon. And then sometimes we take a walk, do something like that to kind of go break up the monotony a little bit. Because you are sitting at the computer basically for 40 hours straight, which is not the best for your body.
And walks are great. Also, if you're stuck on a problem, just leave. Just leave for 15 minutes. Your brain will figure it out.
Next thing was tools. So how many people, what are you guys using? Who's using Unity? Game Maker folks? Couple. And who else? Unreal? What do you guys use?
Photoshop, drawing.
What do you use for engine?
Yeah.
For making the game?
Game Maker. Game Maker is the only one I have experience with.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And then, are there any other ones? I missed some? Okay, cool. So we got the usual pile. Luckily, all those are well supported, and there's tons of documentation. So when you run into a weird problem, just Google it. It's the best. Or look it up in the documentation. Or because we have the ShenaniJAM Discord as well, there's a lot of different devs in there. We're working on different levels. Like some of them are doing Pico 8 stuff. Everybody's familiar with that little micro console. There were some really weird games that came out last year. So if you're working on one of those, feel free to ask questions to the community. That tends to be a really good way to do it. But I would recommend doing it what we refer to as async, which is part of the benefit of having an internet-based jam. So just put your question, just put it out there into the jam and say, hey, I got this question about this thing, describe it, and then just leave. You know, like I said, just go do something else, and then at some point, someone might just like put the answer back in there. And if you're using, I guess for art stuff, it's Photoshop. And then who else is using what? What else we got? Inkscape weirdos. Inkscape, right? Blender. What's that? Toon Boom. Okay, cool. Oh, yeah. Does that export PNG strips? Okay, cool.
Well, it doesn't export strips, but it exports PNGs, which you just like put together into strips.
Gotcha. Cool. So yeah, a big part of it is knowing how your tools are going to talk to each other. So a lot of first timers will be like, oh yeah, I got familiar with Game Maker, I might be good to go. And then you throw some sprites at them and they're like, what? How does this? You go in here, there's a bunch of settings you need to make sure you have toggle and stuff like that. So make sure you try at least the full pipeline once. So have your artist just make a single drawing. It doesn't have to be anything. It can literally be like, here's a sphere. Export it, get it in the game, make sure you know how that whole pipeline works, because if you spend an hour or two kind of debugging how that whole thing works right at the beginning, because you think about it, that'll eat away your pipeline.
So one of the tricks that we learned pretty early on for managing art implementation, because if your artist is on their game, they're going to be pumping out a lot of stuff. And as a programmer, this can be a little bit overwhelming to manage implementing all the code and also figuring out what do I like, where do I need to dig into what folders to find the art assets to pull into the game. So we actually went into sort of a folder-free mode to manage this kind of a problem, where we have a Dropbox folder, all the assets go into there, and then inside of that folder, we call it working images, meaning these are images that haven't been brought into the game. And then inside of that folder, we have another folder called implemented. So once something gets brought into Game Maker, it's dropped into the implemented folder, which means that the folder structure actually becomes a task list for the program. So you just implement stuff and then move it into the implemented folder. So you can do these kinds of easy process improvements to kind of cut down on miscommunications and keep things from sort of falling through the cracks.
So next thing we'll talk about briefly is community participation stuff. So there's people in this room, so feel free to introduce yourself, please, afterward, if there's someone you don't know, or someone who looks new. come say hey to them, and bring them in the community a little bit. And if you're participating on the Discord or on Twitter or whatever else, again, feel free to occasionally reach out to people or go hang out in there. It's really fun to kind of get caught up in the general excitement of it. We don't have a physical location. You probably won't ever for Shenanigan. It's just easier to do this way. So, feel free to hop in and get involved in a little bit of the hype. It's just a lot of fun. People are generally very, very positive about the fact that everyone's trying their darndest to make something functional and maybe slightly aesthetic over the course of the weekend. So just participate and just kind of have a good time.
Yeah. So you might even if you make something terrible, just post it in there. But I made this. And somebody be like, I like the shade of yellow. It's a good credit.
And then the last thing is your upload. So this somehow every year bites a lot of people, which is they don't think about the fact that you got to make the game, and then you got to put it. You got to put it in the pile of games, and putting it there takes a bit of effort and a bit of oftentimes consternation because again tools are. So for a lot of people, make sure you understand how to turn your game into an EXE. It's going to be on Windows. Make sure you understand how the pipeline on itch works. We have it explained there, but we get a lot of questions about it. You'll just upload your game as if you're just putting it up there, and then after it's fully uploaded, then you simply put it into the jam sort of like a separate thing. So it's a very simple 1-2, but a lot of people are like, oh my god, did I miss my bucket? And we got a few of those ways to kind of put it in and grandfather in last year. You will also be, what?
Also make sure that you test your exported game.
Yes.
Yes. Test your exported game.
Yes. You shouldn't have to say it, but absolutely. At least play through it once. And sometimes by the end of the weekend, you're like, it works. It's fine. I just changed one line.
Well, and importantly, clear your save cache for your game's local data, and then test your execute, because that's what your players are going to be working with. They're going to be downloading it and running with an empty save folder. And your game, this has happened to a lot of people, where your game only works because it was loading something from an older version of itself that made it work. And if somebody downloads it fresh, they have no backup data in their save folder, and then the game just crashes on
I was going to say also, after you're done testing it and upload it, download it, and then try it again. Because there have been people that have uploaded it, and then it's been corrupted after uploading it.
Just give yourself some time, finish a little early.
And also, so you can upload at any time, and then you can also just re-upload. So another option is, if you're near the end, like, look, the game's in a pretty good state, we got a few hours left. Let's go ahead and send this off. And then we'll try to do a stretch goal and get something interesting in. If it doesn't work, and we don't have to worry about not having to play it.
The jam actually goes over 72 hours because it's worldwide. We want to make sure people on the other side of the planet, as we required to do this last year, can actually get more of equal time and not be starting at 3 a.m. So you can upload all the way until Monday at 8 a.m. So we'll do sort of like a normal 48-hour thing-ish. We'll start on Friday and then we'll just end on Sunday afternoon and then do the kick down event. So feel free to kind of follow whatever schedule you want, but you do have to get it in before that upload ends on Monday. So I recommend keeping yours finished on Sunday, maybe even making the first upload on Saturday, just sort of like a dummy older thing to kind of get everything in place. And that way you don't have to freak out about it when everything's burning down on Sunday. The last thing we'll talk about is post-jam, post-mortems. So, how many are familiar with post-mortem as a concept? Quite a few. Most. Okay. So, a briefer for anybody who's not familiar. The whole idea of post-mortem is that once you do a thing, you afterwards say, why did that go that way? And then you figure it out, and then sort of make a list of maybe things you can take with you in the future, tools you can add to your kit, so that you can do better next time. So these are something we're very serious about for all of our projects, as well as for post-mortems and jams and anything else. So I highly, highly recommend it because this is also where we've got stuff like stuff that's slowly over the course of the last 5 years with every jam added more and more scripts into this sort of general Butterscotch library that we have built, which allows us now to, when we start a jam project, we start with more like template. We're ready to go. We have like a main menu structure in place. We don't have to worry about that. And there's a bunch of stuff that you can get out of it. You can just ask me the question, as a team, what works well? Like, where did I, as a person, maybe not do so hot? Did I get like super mad at someone on Saturday because of something weird, or did we have like a bad brainstorming session? And really work on not just the game side of things, but also sort of yourself in a professional capacity in this. So those are really, really useful, and I highly recommend at least taking, even right after the jam. Usually we go get burritos, and then we're like, what just happened? Because I've just been doing stuff for 2 days. I have no idea what's going on. So I highly recommend it, getting dinner with your crew afterward, or even just yourself, and just taking a notebook and figuring out what's going on. So basically all we have for you guys. I do want to show you, this is a game that we did not publicly ship. This is for the Global Game Jam 2017. We were going to turn this into its own game, and it's pretty simple. So we were like, we can't show it because maybe someone will take it.
Super easy to follow this.
But who gives a crap? So here's regular
Exactly. We're Butterscotch Shenanigans, and for Global Game Jam 2017, we made Turbo Max Regular Fishing First Edition 3, the sequel. It's a fishing game. So let's go fishing.
So the one twist is that it's a burning game.
Oh my god. So you use a fish, you put it on the line, set it up in the sky, and wing fish. And the birds come swarm in, and they come on your hook there.
You gotta do a quick time bet to hook them.
And now, where's it? So Sam's got, it's like what's a grouper?
Standard.
Let's see, like 27 pound probably. 27? Yeah. Let's see, you got 43. Wow, that's a good sized grouper. Huge. Way off.
That's crystals. You can put additional baits on your hook.
Yeah, let's get crystals. Yeah, that's good. Get something a little more special. Crystals attract a little more. Oh, we got a golden bluebird. See what happens. We don't know what it's going to be. I think it's up in the clouds. We can't see it. We don't know. See this. Oh, God. Yeah, Tim gets pretty good bicep power. So pretty easy to just drag a grouper down to his wandering grave.
Let's do it. All right, so you'll notice we also made a video. So that's one of the requirements for the ShenaniJAM, which is sort of different from a lot of the other jams. So rather than make people download, install, and then play through basically 130 games, which is how many we had to come out of the jam last year, you're required to submit just a 2-minute maximum video of your gameplay. And you can voice over it like we like to do, because it's fun to hear some magic keys and screaming. And make sure you know how your tool works. So we suggest using something like XSplit, which is a free thing you can download, and then you just record, get an MP4 from it. It literally takes 2 minutes if you've already set up. So make sure you set up before, because that's sort of the other thing we get a bunch of questions about, usually at the 11th hour when people are trying to submit something.
It takes 2 minutes to make the video, and then X minutes to upload to YouTube. Don't know?
Be prepared.
Yeah.
And then like 6 hours for them to convert it to YouTube video.
Yeah, exactly. But all you need to get is a link in there, so you're good to go as soon as you get it. So that is sort of all we've got for you guys. It's more prepared stuff. We do have a few more jam games, which I'm just going to turn on the playlist in the background here. So if you guys want to just sort of keep an eye on it as we're going, and then otherwise, just whatever questions you have about any aspect of this, because we also don't know what it's like anymore to be doing this for the first time, or even like the second time, because we've done it too many times. So.
First time. How are the teams formed or decided?
So you can either come, just pick a buddy, and come with a team. We usually recommend, I think we said this in max team size, but we like teams of 2 to 4. So that's like the general max. Beyond that, it tends to be hard for everybody to actually participate for a really close jam.
So there's this concept of communication channel, where if you have 2 people, there's one channel of communication between them. Right? So if you're working, they're working, you just go, hey, let's do this, and they go, okay. And then you had your meeting, right? If you have 3 people, now 2 people might talk to each other, and the third person is headphoned up, or they're in the room, or whatever, and then they don't know what happened. So now you also have to synchronize up, right? To sync up with those people. And this gets even more complicated with 4, 5, 6 people, to the point where once you get into like the 5-person territory, you need someone who basically the job is to manage communication between everybody else, and it just gets too much. So
As few as possible, and then as far as like finding people, either just you can talk to people physically in this space, which is kind of nice to be able to meet people to face. And otherwise, we recommend you can either do it as a solo jam, that's you don't want to work with people, or we have a crowd-sourced, it's called CrowdForge. So if you go to the ShenaniJAM page, there's a little thing, and there's basically people who have put up teams with what their composition is currently, and you can hop into a team. So again, it requires just link exchange on the internet via text, so that's kind of an easy one. And that's what the new sort of tool that we found this year. So
if you do have any kind of proof of what you're capable of.
Yeah,
That's a good time to show it because it'll get you on the team.
From Twitch, Giant Muskrat wants to know, what are some hard things that you do even as seasoned Game Jam people?
Hard things to do?
Yeah, hard things for you to do.
As seasoned jammers, what's one of those difficult things?
So a lot of it comes down to genre.
Yes.
The more action-oriented your game is, the easier it is to get it working very quickly. So something like an endless runner, something that doesn't have physics. So a platformer seems very straightforward, right until you start having moving platforms, pushable blocks, something like that, and all of a sudden. So keep things action-oriented if you want an easier time. If you want a harder time, go with something like a strategy game or a simulation game. Because in those genres, all the pieces have to be in place before the game is fun. And this is also true of games that heavily rely on AI. So we made a game called Do You Even Lift, where you played as an elevator. The thing is, an elevator can't do shit. So you just go up and down and you open and close your doors. Which meant the entire gameplay revolved around the AI of the characters that got onto and off of the elevator and how they interacted with each other. And that wasn't actually done until, I think, Sunday at noon. And we had to submit by 3 or something like that. So we didn't actually know what the game's balance was going to be like, how fun it was going to be, whether we could kind of have a good concept until the very end. Because everything has to work before you can experience it that remotely resembles fun of any kind.
And on the art side of things, I haven't had too many problems. I know a lot of artists have more like a perfectionist bent. They'll just keep on working on the same thing. I have sort of the opposite approach, where I'm like, this looks barely good enough, and I'm kick it out the door and move on with my life. And I would really suggest, honestly, adopting more of that sort of strategy for this. Unless it's the case that you have a really neat animation and you really want to get into the game, you got to recognize that you only have a very brief window of time. And so you're sort of competing with, overall depth of maybe one particular character you put in there, as far as how many animation frames it's got, all this other stuff, versus the breadth of content that you could slam into this game in a 40-hour game. So as an artist, I think one of the things I've seen a bunch, and also with Yun from time to time, is sort of overdoing it in terms of some of the art requirements. So even a game like this, isometric is really, really hard to do. Especially when you can make like 300 different, isometric assets for something, or even creatures that are supposed to look like they fit. You'll notice in a game like this, I just didn't, because I just billboarded all of the characters and they just kind of look this way a little bit. They are not isometrically drawn in the slightest. And the reason is because as soon as I tried to draw one, aside from the cube, which is a salt lick, and the ground itself, which is just a tile to fit, I did not do anything in isometric. And that's because actually I think the first couple things I made in an attempt to do isometric, I realized that my brain was just going to shut down within like an hour and a half or so, that I would be a liquid mess for the rest of the time. So
you can also see the kinds of shortcuts we take here, which is like this character has an eye patch, right? And we were like, well, if he's going to look left and right, then we're going to have to redraw him so that the eye patch will be on the side. But now if he has two eye patches, then you just X flip the sprite and you're good. And a lot of people will get hung up on making sure that the lighting is correct, that the sprite flips. Nobody notices. Just go for quantity. So any kind of a game that demands a large volume of content, and actually even something like Fight of the Gods was a big stretch for us at the time, because we had 7 different weapons that you could pick up, and then 8 different enemies that you could count. And so Sam had to make a whole bunch of different things. That was one of his first times doing art for a game at all.
So as a result, though, none of them were animated. None of them were animated. So the only thing that happens is the projectiles just spun, and their lighting spun with them as they went. No one cares. And then also, the enemies just bounced on the ground. That was it.
So we squished them.
And you can just 100% get away with that, and it doesn't matter. So if you want to push for breadth, try doing that, because a lot of times in a game jam context, it's more about having more pieces in the game than it is about having like one just beautifully rendered character in a black void of space that is unfinished.
It's a game jam, not a art game.
So, but
Do you guys hear we use student software and anything like that?
if you use what now?
Student software.
No, not at all. Yeah, use whatever software you want.
As long as you have a legal right to use it, you're good.
Yes, of course. As far as like what you bring to the jam is very loose in terms of prerequisites. So the whole thing is just start making a game on Friday that adheres to the theme. That's the rule. We bring our own library to it as far as all the stuff that we built, all the scripts we built. We don't bring any art typically, but we bring a bunch of sound effects, which we just sort of had these 8-bit sound effects lying around for like 5 years that we just did everything.
There's a program called BFXR, which we highly recommend for generating 8-bit sound effects. You have a much better time if you pre-generate like 40 different sounds and just make a library for yourself. So the way that we did that was they have little buttons you can click. It's like hit or explosion or whatever, and most of them sound like incoherent garbage. But every now and then you'll get one and you're like, oh, that was vaguely like a thump. so then you can kind of just pick a name for it. So we have sounds like, sound thud hard and then thud wet, even though they're basically the same. It's loose, but we reuse those sounds in just every jam game we make, and they just get the job done. So you can make that stuff.
Yes.
So what was one of the hardest game jams that you had? Like which one did you, like you said the one you were working on it, you just got done at like noon?
I'll show you this one.
Sunday?
That was even this.
This one is Snuffy Wrestling.
So this was the one we made for the ShenaniJAM last year. The thing that was harder than hell about this was that, so we decided, because we had a larger team, and so we had way more art power, and Adam, our third brother and co-founder, decided to join in and try to make multiplayer things, which we've never actually done at all. And so
the problem is the game has to be playable first, and then
you put multiplayer in it /on. So we didn't know how this
it's
works.
pretty challenging to co-develop multiplayer and rest of it at the same time. Technically, it's probably the better way to do it, but in a jam, you want to get something playable guaranteed that you kind of add on top.
Yeah, so there's this weird mix of like Angry Birds hammer throw mechanic, trying to hit the other player, and then some of these creatures, and then a card game with a lot of sort of chess-like strategy going on. And we did manage to get it to work. I think 4 minutes before the deadline for the jam.
Yeah.
So that was probably the most down to the wire thing we've ever experienced. But that was like the best, burrito eating dinner afterwards. We were like, what did we just do? It was wild.
This was also we had developed a sort of script library that allowed us to do skeletal animations in GameMaker, and so this was our first attempt at sort of using that in any kind of setting. So you kind of see how these characters, their arms are kind of floating around and stuff. We do have other things like frame-by-frame animations mixed in here. So at a certain point, we were like, this is taking too long to animate things. Artists get to work on just frame-by-frame stuff. So you got to kind of be used to it.
The important note here is also, as far as like establishing theme and stuff, just one of the best things I've heard from this is the developers of Owlboy, which that game took about 8 years to make. It's absolutely gorgeous pixel art. And he said, at some point, it just becomes interpreting your own abstract art, right? So basically what happens in a lot of these games is I'll just start making a thing, and then I'll just make the next thing that vaguely fits with that. At no point was that like, we're in a blue forest theme with trolls and stuff. I think we started with the troll, and we said, because the theme was slinging the band hammer, we were like, this is appropriate. So I made a troll, and then I made the bee thing, platform, whatever that is, and then made some trees. And then we just kind of grow it. And the thing is, as long as the art is consistent, no one will question anything about your universe. So
also retconning was just the name of the game. So this originally the idea was these trolls were going to be stealing babies. We didn't know why or whose babies. And somewhere these trolls had sort of pens full of babies. And as we kind of worked it, we're like, that's horrifying. So we're like, what if they were just some kind of a weird creature? And so we ended up with these snail babies, or snail puppies, which became Snuffies, and then that's where the name Snuffy Wrestling came from, because it's like cattle wrestling. You're stealing the Snuffies from the other team. So the names of the games come out of nowhere, and you just kind of keep reinterpreting the weird crap that just ends up in the game. So
So I think as long as your team is the one that makes it over the course of the weekend, it will be consistent with itself. It's almost impossible for it not to be unless someone's like throwing clip art in there and then like a high-res photo of something, maybe some pixel sprites, they still all fine. So just try to keep your art consistent and it'll look good, and then you can just make up why it looks like that after.
So besides hard stuff, what's the worst thing that went wrong in one of your games?
I feel like there's something horrible that happens every time. I don't know.
So we made a game called Narwhal Online, which is kind of a top-down stabber, I guess. So you click on the screen and your character sort of shoots across and attacks things on the way. We really liked the concept and we had a really good time with it. And Sam ended up creating a whole bunch of really interesting artifacts that the characters could pick up that would modify different things about your run. Except, I think it was at 8 o'clock in the morning, all of a sudden the game just kept force closing. So 8 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday. And we had this whole list of things that we were going to be adding to the game to finish it. The game just kept force closing, and I thought, is this like a sort of a stuck while loop or something, or what's going on? There were no error messages. I couldn't diagnose it whatsoever. And it took 6 hours to figure it out. The problem was that when these guys got destroyed, they would explode. And exploding basically just spawns an instance of an explosion special effect. And at that time, if you spawn an instance at the same time you change rooms, the game would just crash. And at 8 o'clock in the morning, or around that time, I changed something where these guys all got destroyed when the room changed, which caused them to explode. You didn't see it because the room was changing, right? So it looked exactly as it did before, everything's fine, and then it took 6 hours to kind of put that down, which means we had to cut out that entire last set of features that we wanted to do. So these things happen.
Yeah, I think I was just kind of touching up some rocks for that chunk of time.
And I'm just shooting bullets.
Yeah. So that's a big part of it too. Is like if you're, especially as the artist, the programmer is usually the people who are stressing out during this time. So don't go harassing them. Get your stuff in there because usually there's just it's going to be a blood fountain just spraying off their heads. So
I mean, art is an incredibly challenging thing to do, but on the plus side, you can't destroy the game on accident. Generally, as an artist.
You can with Git.
Programmers destroy the game all the time. It's terrifying. So,
Got another question from Twitch. Are there any general tips for making good game feel?
General tips for game feel. So, first concept of game feel. So, game feel is just the idea that when you pick up a game and play it, it just feels good. There's stuff like screen shake, which is one of the things we use. We have scripts for that. One of the things we found, I think, one of the previous jams is that for the first time in 7 years, we added rotation to the camera, vibration. We were like,
you gotta be real careful with that.
it'll make you vomit almost.
Yeah.
But you can do a little bit, like a degree of it, and it adds a nice little jumbly effect to the camera. So camera work in particular is really important for overall game feel. So shaking the camera when things hit, if you can make it so that they shake more depending on how close they are to your character, if it's an action game, or how close they are to the cursor or something like that, then you get this nice varying feel. And other than that, particle effects, fantastic. Game Maker comes with just a sort of a bunch of built-in ones you can use, or you just sort of drop, we spray blood or shoot sparks or fire, that sort of thing.
Yeah, also, learn how to use alert function when you're installing alert, linear interpolation. That's often just called easing in. It's a simple function that basically says, every frame, say, like let's say you've got an object over here and you want it to go over here. A lot of times what you see for early people's games is they move it in a completely static way where it always moves the same speed. So it'll start going at full speed and then it just stops, right? So this is a very kind of inorganic feel. It almost feels kind of robotic. So if instead you do this linear interpolation where all you say instead is, instead of moving at a certain speed, I'm just going to close 10% of the gap every frame. And then it kind of does this nice smooth. And so we do that. That was actually the only easing function we used all the way through after crashing in every single one of our games. So you can actually do a ton with that. So even when you click on a button, when the button gets clicked, we scale it down, and then we use the lerp concept to just kind of nicely kind of come back to normal scale. So just kind of working these kinds of scale, sort of juicy kind of scale movements and stuff to all of your different mechanics.
So if it was in slow-mo, you can see all the stuff that's going on here, right? So we have screen shake happening basically constantly. And my favorite part when talking about the artists is look how not animated that creature is.
It's just Y scaling and sine.
So I just was like, Seth, can you squish this? And he's like, gotcha. And that's actually how we do a lot of stuff, because again, we're looking for how much breadth can we shove into this game over the course of 8 hours. You'll see these numbers slowly fade out, which is a nice effect. Like if you have on-screen text that's popping up and then just disappearing, it's often very jarring. So again, try to ease things in and out. You'll see this fade coming in and out, and as the rooms change, which is sort of nicely, again, this helps the player not have this sort of snapped eyes effect. And then we have shadows, also one of the fun.
So notice how this thing's scaled up. It kind of gently comes out. That's that.
And again, when it opened, it actually just scaled down and scaled back up and switched frames. So there's no animation of it opening. It just keyframes. That's it. So this is a really good way to see this guy. Look at all this animation going on. One frame. That's it.
Just a little bit of scale. And if you want to get real crazy, one of the key animation techniques used in games like Binding of Isaac is the simultaneous X and Y scale, where if you scale something down on the X or down on the Y, you scale it up on the X. So it gets kind of like real squishy kind of feel to it. Very, very easy to do if you can just set up a simple like 1 or 2 scripts and basically just say, I want to squish this thing, and then you just sort of get the what the X scale would be or the Y scale would be based on how much you squish.
So another good rule of thumb as an artist is to just ask yourself the question before you work on a piece, is the player going to notice or care? So again, the shading is upside down on that. The character X and Y flips and actually switches arms. No one has ever said a word about this to anybody on RPG. And as far as the projectiles go, like they're just spinning, but their shading staying the same. Most things players will not notice because they're worried about the game. And so your job is really to sell the game. It's not about necessarily producing like a ridiculously polished piece of phlegm that flies across the screen 60 frames per second, right? Most people don't care unless you're working like a AAA studio doing some like deflating bags of rice situation in Far Cry or something. You just don't need to worry about most of those things. Any other questions?
So I see like a bunch of drops. You just draw one and then you like just.
That is correct. I drew a single rock.
Well, not.
No, the slime, the
drops
juice.
It's
So there's particles, yeah. So
Did you just draw one?
usually I take a little liberty to do 2. Usually one that's teardrop shaped and one that's just a ball for liquids, and then for rocks you just like kind of jagged, shape. Throw one shade on it, and then you're done. You can make 2 of those. It takes like 3 minutes, and then you ship them off to your programmer. You say make these explode out of it. And yeah, those are really simple things to do. That once you understand kind of how the pipeline works for getting those assets in, you can juice up anything in your game. So stuff like clicking the button, what like Seth was saying, you can ease it, and then you can even shoot blood off of it if you want. And all sorts of crazy stuff.
So the golden rule is that anything that a player can interact with should give some kind of direct feedback. So preferably both auditory and visual feedback. So if you click on a button, it shouldn't just all of a sudden you're now in the next room or whatever. The button should kind of squish in or pop or change color, and it should make a clicking noise or a beeping noise or whatever, so the player knows that that thing is what it's doing what they think it's doing. So,
Push back.
Yeah, I just want to ask, what level of experience do you need to partake in?
You need literally 0 experience, but a lot of heart. Some people don't have a lot of heart, so I think that's the whole trick, because this is actually how we got started making games. It was just by making really hideous and horrible things in like a 2-day window. And the nice thing about it is, like, once it's over, you can be like, well, I'm glad that was.
you just buried it.
You take it out back.
Don't worry about it. We actually have a folder with, I think, so we don't only do these jams sort of with community-oriented events and stuff. We also do internal jams. There was a time where we would do them on a weekly basis. But one time we did 5 jams in 5 days. So we have this folder that's just a graveyard of unbelievably terrible games. I think we have about 140 dead projects in there. So that's okay. You know, the whole point is to just push yourself in some domain and just try to learn something.
Have you ever tried to go back to a jam game and decide to keep going?
Yes. So actually, most of our commercial games have come out of jams. So 100% yes. Actually, let's see if we can find the Quadrupus video.
You were working on Snuppies for a long time.
Also, Snuppies is one of the games too. We can show you from that yet. So this game we made in 7 days for what's called the 7-day roguelike challenge. So make a roguelike game, which is just one where you die permanently. And then the game restarts. This was what the game looked like after 7 days, and then we spent another, I think, 3 months on it. And we launched it, ended up getting about 2 million users on Google Play and iOS. This is about 2 months of work, 2 or 3 months more of work on the project. And this is definitely how we usually end up finding our sort of next project, is through doing these jams. So we like Snuppy Rustling is one of the games that's in the back of our catalog right now. Like, we've been working on that one. We just had a discussion about it this morning about one of the design problems we have with it. Currently working on something else, but it's just been percolating back there. We worked on it for 6 months before we put it aside. So we had the ShenaniJAM in May of last year. We worked on that game basically all the way up until Christmas, and then we turned over and worked on another game since. We're sort of trying to get this year. So yeah, all the time.
Another from Twitch. What was the most recent thing you learned from a jam?
Most recent thing you learned from a jam? I guess our most recent one was Snuppies, wasn't it?
Yep.
Did we do it for the Love Game yet?
Yeah. I just showed up for that list, the first times. We were in the middle of some more stuff. Yeah, so let's see, the most recent things we learned from a jam. Well, that was the first time, so when we made Snuppy Rustling, it's the first time we had made a turn-based competitive strategy game.
Would not recommend it for a 48-hour game jam.
The first time we'd done anything resembling sort of like a card battling or deck building sort of a thing. It was the first time we had done multiplayer, and the first time we had a team larger than 4. So the list of things that we learned is pretty extensive. I think one of the best things that we probably did was we developed the game in multiplayer completely independently. And our web developer, Adam, he was just working on sort of creating an API that the game could talk to, so then regularly throughout development, as we reached milestones with the gameplay, we talk to him and say, okay, here's how the game is working now, so this is the kind of data that we're going to need to be sending from play to play. And he also implemented a dead simple matchmaking system, which is basically one person joins, and waits, and the next person clicks the button gets matched to that person. So you can do these kinds of simple tricks to kind of make a multiplayer game. So we learned how to do all that kind of stuff by putting ourselves in a position where we had to solve those problems. We had never done any of those.
Are we able to continue to use or communicate on the Butterscotch community Discord?
Yep. Yeah. So the question is, are you able to continue communicating on the Discord server once the jam's over? Right. So yes, absolutely. We actually just turn it into the game dev channel. So it's usually the game dev channel when we switch over to ShenaniJAM. I think we added it this year. It's a separate channel. So there's a group of people who've just been still in there since last year, just kind of working on their stuff or just kind of chatting stuff. So it tends to be a really good place to kind of hang out and especially if you continue working on the same game, it's feedback. Good.
Sorry, you can share whatever you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So post GIFs, post videos, whatever you want. Post playables if you want feedback. They're usually game jams, you don't have time for any feedback, so there's something else. And then on that note, as far as like community interaction goes, once the jam is done, we actually have a meeting. So there's also one of the differences between our jam and most of the other ones online. The community gets to vote and rate games. So you'll be competing against like 130 other ones, but we then go and we play the top 10 games that the community picked during that jam event. So they put them both on our YouTube channel, and it's just kind of a fun way to, again, for us to have like a little bit of a dialogue with the broad community of making games, and also for people to get some eyeballs on their work. We had some really fun and weird, wacky stuff.
There's some weird stuff.
There's like dabbing, fight me.
I made one where the kid's thumb gets like 6 times larger than his body to punch people.
And there was a Pico 8 game where you were cutting fungus off the foot.
Oh.
Just the grossest thing I've probably ever seen. But then some of those we looked through we watched the whole, because all those YouTubes we just put in, all the YouTube videos we just put in playlists, so you can sit there for like, basically take like an hour and a half actually at the end of the jam, and you just sort of like hang out and watch.
I was one that we had 130 games last time.
2 minutes each.
Yeah. So it's like that's like an afternoon, right? So it makes it popcorn.
Yeah, just watching crazy stuff. And like if you see something that you like from someone, go and just leave a comment. You don't have to play it necessarily, but leave a comment on your thing, or go check it out and give them a rating. So you can have a really nice community vibe, but it's 100% like how much you want to be involved versus like you get as much out as you put in play.
And I know the rating concept is maybe a little intimidating for some folks who have either haven't done a jam or have only done jams just kind of for fun. So the way we kind of think about this is it's kind of like running a mile, which is nobody cares how fast you can run a mile. It's just a form of feedback on just kind of how you're doing, right? And so by getting feedback from everybody else about your game, then if you come back next year and participate again, then you can kind of see how you can improve in different areas by what kinds of responses you give. So it's more about sort of metering your own progress and improving over time, more so than just, because nobody is static, right? As long as you keep working on stuff, you'll keep improving. And so it's okay if you get low scores in some stuff. That's just feedback on what you can work on and improve on, right? Yeah.
You talked about using Dropbox for file sharing. What about for the entire project?
We've tried that in the past. We end up using Bitbucket. We may also use something like GitHub or something like that. If you're doing any kind of repository work, you're like saving into Dropbox or pulling down from Dropbox with a gaming project, community project, or something like that, you may run into syncing issues because the projects tend to be made of huge volume of files. And if one or two of them gets out of sync when you switch computers, or if you, maybe your laptop flies into the river and you got to run over to Micro Center and buy a new one real quick and get back to work, and you have some missing files all of a sudden, now your project is corrupted. So we were really early on in the studio. We did lose some smaller projects to that kind of an issue. Awesome. Yeah, they're just gone. They're just destroyed. So, so stuff like Bitbucket or GitHub, where you're actually committing everything at once and pushing it up, is much safer time.
Do you have any tips for people who are going solo, other than GitHub?
If you're going solo, keep it simple. So keep it real simple. There's a game jam called Ludum Dare. Tomato, whatever it is, which is a solo game making competition. So if you want some inspiration on like what kinds of things are possible for a solo person to do, just go over there to the competition section of the Ludum Dare website and see what kind of things people can make. I also recommend, so for example, if art isn't your strong suit, then focus on things like shape and color palettes. So we actually taught a course, taking a course at WashU a year ago or something like that. And one of the requirements we had on the students when they made their first game was they were not allowed to use art at all. And they instead had to use only shape and color to kind of convey what was happening in the game. So then you learn about things like, hey, round things tend to be good, pointy things tend to be bad, right? And green things tend to be nice, while red things tend to be bad in some way. So you can communicate a lot just by using shapes and color, which then allows you to focus on the mechanical aspects of the game. Actually, there was this one guy with Global Game Jams who made an RPG purely out of squares. And he was just narrating it. He's like, so this is a wizard, and it's just like blue square.
I think it was one of the best demos I've ever seen.
And everybody was laughing, and it was great. The gameplay was great. The story was really goofy. Because it's easy to do a story, because you just put text on the screen, right? And as long as you tell somebody that this square is a wizard, they're like, yeah, that's a wizard. No problem.
Consistency is key.
Yeah.
We
Final questions?
Any advice for people working with an international team?
Working international. Figure out the sleep situation.
One of you's gonna have to sync up probably. It's like working asynchronously is just a nightmare. So you're gonna have to figure out when you're gonna be working all at the same time and try to maximize that sort of together time. Otherwise, you're gonna have a rough.
On
It's
that,
invariably, we'll have a lot of stuff with, we'll talk about, oh, we want this end of the game, he does this particular thing, oh, to make it, he says, and then he's like, no, this doesn't quite work based on all this other crap that's not in the game that I put in, but I can just put an explosion on it, and it's good to go. So, like, we do a lot of sort of duct tape work around each other's sort of async problems. So be open, like, make sure your team's ready for, like, I know you wanted this, but this is what happened. It will work asynchronously, so it doesn't work.
I also suggest making a list on like Trello or something like that, so you have things that if something isn't working and you just need to work on something else, you have a list already made for it.
We actually used a Google Doc for all of our sort of project management in the early days. Because when we had just two people, you could both see what's in the document, and so it doesn't take very much work. Also, conveniently, Google Doc becomes passionate over time. So that's right. I think that's all the time we have. All right. So thank you all very much. I think we'll be just chilling, hanging out for a little bit. So if anybody has any other questions that you were too nervous to ask, because they're very serious questions.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, if this is your first time potentially jamming, first time picking up Game Maker or Unity or something like that, like, please absolutely just approach it with sort of that childlike experience of just saying, you're here to sort of color vaguely inside the lines. That's the only requirement. Just start going all over this thing. The worst thing you can do is be too scared to actually participate and really put yourself in. So just try to put yourself out there, make art, make a game, make some music, and make something weird for this week.
You may not even finish. This does happen.
Totally fine.
People get sort of bite off more than they can chew, or they hit a weird bug that breaks everything at the last minute, and you may not even get a game submitted. That's fine. You'll still learn a ton, and you can. I mean, that doesn't mean you can't still finish off the game and just show people, send it to people in the Discord channel or whatever. That's still fun. It'll still make the experience.
Cool. Well, thanks a bunch, and I guess we'll see you over the weekend on That's right.